6 Americans killed in Kuwait. A hotel bombed in Erbil. The U.S. Embassy telling its own citizens to leave Iraq immediately. And that was just the first week. Here's what nobody is saying clearly enough. This is no longer a strike and a counterstrike. This is a cycle, a machine that feeds itself. And once a machine like this starts running, stopping it requires something far more painful than starting it. I'm going to walk you through exactly how we got here. Step by step. Decision by decision. Because understanding the chain matters, not just for what already happened, but for what's coming next. And I promise you, by the end of this video, what's coming next is going to look very different from what the headlines are telling you. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a joint military campaign against Iran. The operation was called Roar of the Lion. Its stated goal was not just a punitive strike. According to the Middle East Forum analysis released the same day, this was described as a regime disruption campaign, the most significant American combat operation in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Iran's response was immediate. Within hours, Iranian ballistic missiles and drone swarms struck U.S. military assets across the Gulf, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE. American bases that had operated for years under the assumption that deterrence would hold. Deterrence did not hold. On March 2nd, 6 U.S. service members were killed at the port of Shuaiba in Kuwait, a direct Iranian strike on a makeshift operations center inside a civilian port facility. No warning, no sirens. A triple-wide trailer used as an office hit dead center, walls blown outward, fire still burning hours later. The same day, Iranian-backed militia groups in Iraq struck the Erbil Arjan by Rotana Hotel, a civilian building they claimed housed American troops and contractors operating covertly in Iraqi Kurdistan. And by March 21st, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and the Consulate General in Erbil had issued their most severe warning yet. U.S. citizens should leave Iraq now. Not a travel advisory, not a caution, an evacuation order. To understand what is happening, you need to understand the structure of this conflict. This is not a war between two armies on a battlefield. It is a war fought on at least 5 separate fronts simultaneously, each with its own actors, its own logic, and its own capacity to escalate independently. Front 1. Iran versus U.S. forces in the Gulf. Direct Iranian ballistic missile and drone strikes against American military installations in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. Iran's IRGC has claimed strikes against U.S. Navy assets, including allegations, disputed by the Pentagon, of hits on the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group. Front 2. Iran versus U.S. forces in Iraq. Militia groups embedded in Iraqi state structures launching attacks on declared bases, undeclared positions, and now civilian hotels hosting American personnel. By March 18th, Kurdish media network Rudaw had estimated almost 300 drone and missile attacks in the Kurdistan region alone since the conflict began. Front 3. Iran versus Gulf civilian infrastructure. Strikes on Dubai International Airport, Kuwait International Airport, 5-star resorts, civilian residential areas, oil facilities. Iran deliberately targeting the economic architecture of U.S. allied Gulf states. Front 4. U.S. and allied forces striking Iranian territory. CENTCOM confirmed more than 7,800 targets struck inside Iran by March 18th. Large-scale precision strikes on Karg Island, Iran's primary oil export terminal. Drone production factories in Tehran. Naval assets destroyed across the Persian Gulf. Over 6,000 combat sorties flown. Front 5. Iraq as a battlefield between both sides. Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein said it publicly in Baghdad. Iraq has become one of the countries directly affected by the ongoing conflict. EQ. The country is being attacked from both sides. American Apache helicopters striking Iranian-aligned militias inside Iraqi territory. Iranian proxies striking American positions from within Iraqi civilian infrastructure. 5 fronts, running at the same time, each one capable of producing the incident that turns this from a regional war into something that cannot be contained. Here is what an escalation cycle actually looks like from the inside. It doesn't feel like a spiral when you're in it. Each individual response feels proportionate, justified, controlled. The U.S. strikes Iranian nuclear infrastructure. Iran retaliates against Gulf bases. The U.S. retaliates against militia command structures in Iraq. The militias respond by hitting hotels and consulates. The U.S. launches Apache strikes against militia positions. Iran fires another missile barrage at American carrier groups. Every step feels like a response. None of them feel like an escalation. But from the outside, from 30,000 feet, what you see is a machine accelerating. Rand Corporation published a direct assessment of this dynamic in March 2026. Their conclusion was precise. Iran has pursued an escalate to de-escalate strategy, the assumption being that by hurting U.S. allies and partners in the region, it will turn up the pressure on the Trump administration to end the war. In other words, Iran is not trying to win a military victory against the United States. It is trying to make the cost of the war politically unbearable for Washington. 6 dead Americans in Kuwait, a bombed hotel in Erbil, airports in Dubai and Kuwait shut down or damaged, oil prices spiking, Gulf allies quietly asking whether the U.S. umbrella can actually protect them. Every one of those outcomes serves Tehran's strategy, and every American military response, however justified, feeds the pressure Iran is trying to build. This is the trap at the center of the escalation cycle, and right now, Washington is still trying to fight its way out of it with airstrikes. The consequences of this cycle are already spreading far beyond the battlefield. Oil markets. Iran has explicitly threatened the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves every day. Even the threat of closure sent prices surging. Actual disruption would trigger a global economic shock that no American household would be insulated from. Gas prices, food prices, supply chains, everything connected to energy, which is everything, would feel it within days. U.S. alliances in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. These governments have structured their entire security architecture around American military guarantees. When Iranian drones hit Dubai's airport, one of the busiest aviation hubs on the planet, and the U.S. could not prevent it, a question was asked in every Gulf capital that no one wants to say out loud. Is Washington's protection still worth the risk of hosting American forces? That question does not have an easy answer anymore. The Iraq problem. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, confirmed publicly on March 19 that U.S. Apache helicopters were conducting strikes against Iranian-aligned militia groups inside Iraq. American forces striking targets inside a country the U.S. officially considers an ally. The Iraqi government, which cannot openly endorse the strikes without losing domestic legitimacy, also cannot stop them. Baghdad is paralyzed, and in that paralysis, the militias continue to operate, attack, and recruit. The attrition question. Foreign Policy published a direct warning on March 23, 2026. The headline reading, "The Iran war is threatening to become for America what Ukraine is for Russia." A war of attrition. No clear exit. No clear definition of victory. Costs accumulating on both sides until one of them reaches a breaking point, political, economic, or military. That comparison is not hyperbole. It is a documented historical pattern, and the United States has lived through it before. In Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. The question is whether the lessons of those wars are being applied here. But here is what makes this escalation cycle different from every previous one. There is a factor operating in the background that most analysts are not fully weighing. It involves Russia. And once you understand what Russia is doing in this conflict, the entire picture shifts. UK Defense Secretary John Healey stated publicly in March 2026 that Russia has a hidden hand directing. Iranian drone attacks. His assessment: Tehran's tactics are becoming more sophisticated. Not because Iran suddenly developed new capabilities, but because someone with extensive drone warfare experience is helping refine them. That someone is Moscow. Russia has every strategic incentive to see the United States bogged down in a multi-front Middle East conflict. Every American missile fired at Iran is a missile not going to Ukraine. Every U.S. carrier group positioned in the Arabian Sea is a carrier group not available to deter Russian action in Europe. Every $1 billion spent on Operation Epic Fury is $1 billion not flowing to NATO allies. Russia is not firing a single shot in this conflict. It doesn't have to. It is providing Iran with the tactical intelligence, drone technology refinements, and operational guidance that makes the Iranian proxy network more dangerous, and the escalation cycle harder to break. This means the United States is not just fighting Iran. It is fighting a war that Russia is actively prolonging from a distance, at zero cost to itself and enormous cost to Washington. And that dynamic changes the mathematics of the conflict entirely. Because Iran can absorb pain. Its regime has been doing it for decades. But it can absorb it much longer if Moscow is in the background, providing both material support and strategic counsel. So where does this escalation cycle end? There are two realistic trajectories. Trajectory 1. Negotiated off-ramp. On March 25th, Reuters reported that Israel struck Tehran as President Trump simultaneously announced the U.S. was making progress in efforts to negotiate an end to the war, with reports of a 15-point plan sent to Tehran. This suggests that alongside the military campaign, a parallel diplomatic track is running. If that track produces a framework, one that addresses Iran's nuclear program, lifts some sanctions, and provides Tehran with enough face-saving language to declare a victory domestically, the cycle could be interrupted, not ended. Interrupted. Because the proxy networks, the militia infrastructure, the drone production capacity, none of that disappears with a ceasefire. It goes dormant, and dormant is not the same as gone. Trajectory 2. The miscalculation. Somewhere in the noise of 300 drone attacks in Kurdistan, Apache strikes on militia positions in Iraq, ballistic missiles over the Gulf, and Russian advisors helping Iran refine its targeting. A mistake happens. An Iranian strike kills 50 Americans instead of 6. A U.S. strike hits a site that Iran considers a red line. An automated air defense system makes a decision in 3 seconds that a human would have taken 3 hours to authorize. And suddenly, the negotiating track collapses. The military track accelerates. And the conflict crosses a threshold that none of the parties involved actually wanted to cross, but that all of them helped build, one escalation step at a time. The hotel bombing in Erbil was not an isolated incident. The killing of 6 Americans in Kuwait was not an isolated incident. They are data points in a pattern of sustained, multi-front, carefully calibrated Iranian pressure, designed to make American resolve collapse before Iranian resolve does. CENTCOM has struck over 7,800 targets inside Iran. Iran has launched hundreds of attacks across the Gulf, Iraq, and beyond, and neither side has found its breaking point yet. The U.S. is now striking militia groups inside Iraq with Apache helicopters. Russia is quietly helping Iran make its drones harder to stop. A 15-point peace plan has reportedly been sent to Tehran. And somewhere between those three facts, military escalation, Russian involvement, and desperate diplomacy, the next move is being calculated. By the time you see it in the headlines, it will already have happened. And the cycle will have moved to its next step. Whatever that step is, nobody is going to call it an escalation when it starts. They never do.